Breaking down the U.S. adult population, we find 1 in 3, roughly 79 million people, possess a criminal record. Yet traditional media often shrinks this massive group into a tiny, isolated box, creating a distorted perception of the justice system. Kerry Washington is leveraging her position as an A-list actor to operate as a cultural disruptor. Through her production company, she is attempting to bridge the gap between these statistical realities and the stories we see on screen. The catalyst for her activism was personal. During college, Washington learned her father had been under a decade-long federal investigation by the IRS, a process that had remained a complete family secret until his sentencing. Her family endured years of manufactured shame and isolation to maintain that silence. It was a first-hand experience of how the legal system exerts pressure on the private lives and dignity of entire families. These experiences led Washington to conclude that system-wide change requires a shift in the cultural imagination. Before society can accept different laws, it must first be willing to accept a different kind of protagonist. Washington's strategy is rooted in her work on Scandal, where she and costume designer Lynn Paulo meticulously constructed the visual identity of Olivia Pope. They utilized white coats, tailored pants, and high-end Prada bags to build what Paulo calls a cocoon for the actor. This aesthetic was designed to project undeniable power and command respect for a character who was often deeply flawed. This highlights a core psychological mechanism in media. The specific way a character is visually and narratively coded dictates the level of empathy and dignity an audience is willing to afford them. Washington now applies this same blueprint to justice reform through her production company's work on projects like the legal drama Reasonable Doubt. Her creative directive for the show is to explicitly love criminals. This approach actively humanizes defendants, challenging the narrative tropes that typically demonize those caught in the legal system. By redesigning the aesthetic and narrative framing of the criminal, Washington's work provides a template for viewing defendants with a level of humanity that the current system often obscures. Washington also employs a strategy of depoliticization, using universal dynamics, like the relationship between a father and daughter, to reach viewers who might otherwise be defensive regarding prison reform. Her projects UnPrisoned and Daughters center on family reunification and love, moving the focus away from the typical settings of courtroom drama or prison violence. The joy depicted in these stories stands in direct opposition to the institutional reality of modern prisons, which have increasingly replaced in-person touch visits with physical barriers and monitoring equipment. Replacing physical human contact with sterile video calls and brass partitions can strip individuals of their resilience, turning the process of incarceration into one of profound dehumanization. Centering these narratives on comedy, joy, and physical touch is a calculated challenge to the logic of the prison industrial complex. By highlighting the basic human connections the system attempts to sever, these stories shift the viewer's focus from abstract policy to the tangible, emotional cost of punitive isolation. This side-by-side logic flow maps two very different outcomes. On the left, a reliance on punishment creates a dead-end loop of shame. On the right, true accountability requires a difficult process of making amends, which facilitates a cycle of growth. Washington witnessed the impact of this distinction firsthand at San Quentin State Prison, where programs involving photography, journalism, and even baseball provide incarcerated individuals with opportunities for rehabilitative growth. This programming suggests that when individuals are allowed to engage with their own humanity and contribute something of value, they build the resilience necessary to re-enter society without returning to the system. This direct link between narrative empathy and restorative outcomes suggests that the story society prioritizes can set the stage for how it eventually approaches legislative and systemic reform. Washington's work is built on the thesis that restoration begins when the culture accepts that every person, regardless of their past interaction with the law, is the hero of their own journey.